The Alpha King's pups suffered daily until the new Omega Maid found horror hidden in his fur. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character, Eliza Moore. Eliza Moore learned quickly that silence ruled Blackwood Keep. The halls were wide enough for echoes to wander. The stone floors polished until they reflected torchlight like still water, and the air carried the weight of order that came from serving an Alpha King who valued control above comfort. Eliza was new, and Omega Maid assigned simple tasks and simple rules, the most important of which was never to ask questions. She kept her eyes lowered, her steps soft, and her words few, because that was how an Omega survived in a place built for power. It was on her third morning that she noticed the pup. Rowan was small for his age, a quiet shadow that lingered near doorways and behind columns, watching the world with eyes too old for a child. Other servants passed him without slowing, some with polite nods, others with unease, as if his presence reminded them of something they preferred not to see. Eliza noticed how he favored one side when he sat, how he flinched at sudden sounds, how he pressed his small body against the cold stone as though it grounded him. No one spoke of it. The healers had already declared him healthy. The guard said he was simply timid. And the Alpha King, Alaric Blackwood, was often away, leading councils, enforcing borders, carrying the weight of an entire territory on his shoulders. Eliza told herself it wasn't her place to care, yet care arrived anyway, uninvited, settling in her chest each time she saw Rowan retreat into himself. When she was assigned to assist with the pup's daily routine, her hands trembled with a mixture of fear and resolve. She knelt to his height, moving slowly, letting him see her palms, offering the kind of patience that had kept her alive long before. She reached these walls. Rowan did not speak. He only watched, breathing shallow, his small fingers curling into the fabric of his tunic. Eliza felt the stillness of him, the effort it took for him to simply exist. As she brushed his fur under the warm lantern glow, she sensed something was wrong, not in a way that could be named, but in a way that made her chest tighten. The fur along his shoulder lay thicker, denser, as if it had learned to hide what lay beneath. Eliza slowed, her touch careful, respectful, listening with her hands the way Omegas sometimes did. Rowan's breath hitched, and he leaned, just slightly, into her presence. In that quiet moment, surrounded by stone and silence, Eliza understood that whatever had been overlooked here was still hurting, still waiting, and that seeing it would change everything. Eliza did not pull her hand away when Rowan leaned into her touch, even though her heart began to pound hard enough that she could feel it in her throat. She reminded herself to breathe slowly, the way she had learned as a child when fear threatened to make her freeze. The lantern flickered softly, casting warm light across the small room, and in that quiet space, she became aware of how carefully Rowan was holding himself together, like someone bracing against an unseen cold. She adjusted her grip on the brush, moving inch by inch, letting her fingers guide her more than her eyes. The fur along his shoulder resisted slightly, as if it had been trained to lie a certain way, and when she parted it gently, Rowan let out a small sound that was not quite a whimper, but close enough to make Eliza's chest ache. She paused, murmuring soothing words without thinking, the kind of simple reassurances that asked nothing in return. Rowan's breathing slowed, though his body remained tense, and Eliza realized with a quiet shock that he trusted her not to stop. As she continued, she noticed faint discolorations beneath the skin, not fresh, not open, but wrong in a way that made her stomach twist. They were hidden carefully, masked by thick fur and silence, and the realization sent a chill through her despite the warmth of the room. Eliza swallowed, steadying herself, because panic would help no one. She focused instead on Rowan, on the way his small fingers had relaxed their grip on his tunic, on how his shoulders lowered just a fraction as if releasing a burden he had carried alone. She thought of the other servants, of the rules that said an Omega Maid did her task and left, and for the first time since arriving at Blackwood Keep, she felt something stronger than obedience take hold. When she finished brushing, she wrapped Rowan in a clean towel and guided him to sit, her movements slow and careful, never sudden. He looked up at her then, his eyes searching her face with quiet intensity, and Eliza felt the weight of that look settle deep in her bones. She offered a small smile, unsure if it would be welcomed, and to her surprise, Rowan did not look away. He stayed, watching, as if memorizing the fact that someone had noticed. Later, as Eliza stepped back into the corridor, the keep felt different, its silence heavier now that she understood what it hid. Servants moved past her with practiced efficiency, unaware that anything had changed, but Eliza knew it had. She replayed the moment in her mind, the hidden signs beneath the fur, the way Rowan had leaned into her as though her presence eased something inside him. By the time she reached the laundry room, her hands were trembling, not from fear of punishment, but from the knowledge that she could not unsee what she had seen. That night, as torches dimmed and the keep settled into uneasy rest, Eliza lay awake on her narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of guards changing shifts. Somewhere within those walls, Rowan was trying to sleep, carrying pain no one else seemed willing to acknowledge. Eliza pressed her hand to her chest, making herself a silent promise that she would not look away again, even if doing so cost her the fragile safety she had only just begun to find. Morning light filtered through the high windows of Blackwood Keep, pale and cool, and Eliza moved through her duties with a heightened awareness that made every sound sharper and every silence heavier. She watched Rowan more closely now, noticing patterns she had missed before, the way he grew still when footsteps approached, the way his shoulders tightened when unfamiliar voices filled the hall, the way he lingered near walls as if seeking support from the stone itself. Other servants spoke of schedules and orders, of meals prepared and corridors cleaned, but no one spoke of the pup's quiet endurance. Eliza learned that Rowan often woke before dawn, padding softly through the keep while most slept, choosing corners where the light was dim and the world asked nothing of him. When healers passed through, he straightened and forced a calm that fooled even experienced eyes, and when they left, the effort drained from him like air from a held breath. Eliza saw it all and felt helpless each time she was told her tasks lay elsewhere. She carried linens past the training yard and heard laughter and confident voices, the sounds of strength that defined the keep, and she wondered how such noise could exist alongside so much unseen pain. Word spread that the Alpha King would return that evening, his presence anticipated with the kind of tension that straightened backs and hushed complaints. Alaric Blackwood was spoken of with respect and distance, a leader whose decisions shaped lives far beyond these walls, and Eliza understood why no one wished to burden him with what they assumed were minor concerns. Yet as the day wore on, Rowan's movements grew slower, his eyes dull with exhaustion he did not name, and Eliza's resolve hardened into something unyielding. She found moments to sit with him, offering small comforts like warm water and soft cloths, never pressing, always waiting for his consent in the quiet ways Omegas often learned. Rowan responded not with words, but with presence, staying near her longer, following her with hesitant steps when allowed, as if anchoring himself to the one person who had truly seen him. When evening came, the keep shifted, torches lit in careful sequence, guards took their places, and the air vibrated with the return of authority. Eliza stood at the edge of the hall, heart racing, as Alaric Blackwood entered, tall and composed, his expression unreadable as he acknowledged his household. Rowan appeared then, drawn by instinct or hope, and for a moment Eliza thought the Alpha King might see what she had seen, the strain hidden behind careful stillness. But Alaric's attention was divided by reports and greetings, and Rowan retreated once more, unnoticed in plain sight. The realization struck Eliza with quiet force that pain could exist even in the presence of love, if no one knew how to look. That night, as the keep settled and the Alpha King retired to his chambers, Eliza lingered near Rowan's door under the pretense of final checks. She heard his soft breathing, uneven with discomfort, and placed her hand against the wood, grounding herself in the promise she had made. Whatever lay hidden had survived because silence allowed it to, and Eliza understood that breaking silence carried risk, especially for an Omega with no standing. Still, as she turned away, She felt certain that the cost of doing nothing would be far greater, because some suffering did not fade with patience, and some truths demanded to be brought into the light. Eliza was assigned to bathe Rowan again the following afternoon, a task that should have felt routine, but instead settled over her like a held breath. She prepared the basin with warm water, testing it with her wrist the way her mother once taught her, and laid out fresh towels with deliberate care. Rowan approached slowly, eyes flicking to the door and back to her, and Eliza offered a calm smile that asked permission rather than obedience. When he nodded, just barely, she guided him to sit, speaking softly about ordinary things, the weather beyond the walls, the way the light changed in the courtyard at noon, anything to keep her voice steady. As she worked, her hands returned to the place along his shoulder where her instincts had warned her before, and this time she did not hesitate. She parted the fur carefully, moving strand by strand, aware of how Rowan's body stilled beneath her touch. What she saw made her chest tighten, not because it was graphic, but because it told a story no one had listened to. Beneath the thick fur were faint, old markings, uneven patches where the skin had healed imperfectly, places that spoke of prolonged discomfort rather than a single accident. They were subtle, easy to dismiss if one did not look closely, but impossible to ignore once seen. Eliza felt a wave of sorrow rise in her, controlled only by her determination to remain gentle. Rowan let out a quiet breath, leaning forward as if releasing tension he had carried for far too long, and Eliza realized with a shock that he had expected her to stop, to look away as others had. Instead, she adjusted her touch, lighter now, respectful, and continued to clean the area without comment, without judgment. She focused on soothing rather than questioning, on presence rather than panic, and Rowan responded by relaxing further, his small frame finally trusting that he was safe in this moment. When she finished, Eliza wrapped him in a towel and held it snugly around his shoulders, careful not to press where it hurt, and Rowan rested his forehead briefly against her arm, a gesture so small it nearly undid her. She guided him to a bench near the window, letting the afternoon light warm them both, and stayed longer than her duties technically allowed. Eliza's mind raced, assembling what she had seen into understanding, not accusation, and she knew that what troubled her most was not the existence of the hidden harm, but how easily it had been overlooked. As footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor, Eliza straightened, smoothing Rowan's fur back into place, restoring the mask the world expected him to wear. She stood, heart pounding, and in that moment she understood that silence had been complicit, not cruel, but insufficient. Leaving the room, she moved through the keep with a clarity she had never known, the stones beneath her feet no longer neutral, but demanding responsibility. She did not know yet how she would speak, or to whom, only that what she had discovered could not remain hidden. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell marked the passing of the hour, and Eliza felt time press forward, urging her toward a choice she could no longer avoid. Eliza carried the weight of what she had seen with her through the rest of the day, feeling it in the careful way she folded linens and the way she paused before speaking, as if the air itself might carry secrets. Rowan stayed close whenever he could, hovering near doorways when she passed, his presence quiet but insistent, and Eliza realized that the discovery had shifted something between them, not into fear, but into fragile trust. She noticed how he relaxed when she was nearby, how his breathing evened out, how the tension in his shoulders softened by degrees too small for anyone else to notice. The keep moved on around them, efficient and orderly, but Eliza felt as though she were walking through a different place now, one layered beneath the obvious, where small signs mattered more than loud declarations. That evening, as dusk painted the windows in muted gold, Eliza was summoned to assist with Rowan's supper, a simple meal prepared to be gentle and warm. She sat with him longer than required, offering quiet encouragement, watching as he ate slowly, carefully, as if guarding against discomfort he did not name. When he finished, she wiped his hands with a soft cloth, and he did not pull away. Instead, he looked up at her, eyes steady, and for the first time he spoke, his voice barely louder than a breath, asking if it would hurt again tonight. The question struck Eliza with a force she had to hide, and she answered honestly, telling him she would stay as long as she was allowed, that she would not let him be alone with it. Rowan nodded, accepting this promise with the seriousness of someone who had learned not to expect more. As the hours passed and the keep quieted, Eliza sensed that the moment to act was approaching, though she did not yet know how. She overheard whispers among the staff, murmurs of concern dismissed as routine, and she recognized the familiar pattern of avoidance. When the Alpha King's presence moved closer through the halls, announced by respectful silence rather than sound, Eliza felt her resolve tighten. She did not seek him out, knowing that rushing would only invite dismissal, but she positioned herself where she could be seen, steady and composed. Rowan followed, standing just behind her, small hand brushing her sleeve in a silent request for reassurance. Eliza placed her hand over his briefly, grounding them both, and felt him lean into that contact with quiet relief. The air shifted as Alaric Blackwood approached, his attention drawn not by noise, but by something unspoken, the way Rowan stood, the way Eliza did not step aside. Time seemed to slow, stretching the seconds into something heavy and deliberate. Eliza met the Alpha King's gaze without defiance, only purpose, aware of her place yet unwilling to surrender the truth she carried. She did not speak yet, knowing that the moment demanded patience as much as courage. Rowan's breathing grew shallow, his body bracing for what might come, and Eliza sensed the depth of his fear, not of confrontation, but of being overlooked once more. In that charged stillness, Eliza understood that the greatest harm had not been caused by intent, but by neglect, by the ease with which quiet suffering could be mistaken for resilience. She tightened her grip on Rowan's hand and prepared herself to step forward, certain now that the horror she had uncovered would remain unbearable only if it stayed hidden. Alaric Blackwood halted when he saw them standing there together, the Omega Maid and his son forming a quiet line against the vastness of the hall, and something in his expression shifted from authority to focused attention. He dismissed the attendants around him with a subtle gesture, creating a pocket of stillness that felt deliberate, and his gaze moved from Eliza to Rowan and back again, sharp and assessing. Eliza felt the weight of it press against her shoulders, but she did not lower her eyes. She stood with her spine straight, her hand resting lightly over Rowan's, offering him silent reassurance as his fingers tightened around hers. Alaric noticed that too, the way Rowan did not retreat, the way he stayed grounded by her presence, and concern flickered across the Alpha King's face. He knelt then, bringing himself to Rowan's level, his movements careful, his voice softened in a way few ever heard. Rowan looked at him, hesitated, then leaned closer to Eliza instead of away, a choice that struck deeper than any accusation. Eliza took a measured breath and spoke, her voice calm but steady, explaining what she had observed, not as an accusation, but as a truth uncovered through care and attention. She described the hidden signs beneath Rowan's fur, the way his body responded to gentle touch, the patterns of discomfort that had been mistaken for shyness. She chose her words with care, knowing each one carried weight, and as she spoke, Alaric's expression grew still, his focus narrowing to a single point. He asked to see for himself, his tone firm yet restrained, and Eliza nodded, guiding Rowan to sit, while keeping her touch light and reassuring. With deliberate care, she parted the fur just enough for the truth to be visible, allowing the Alpha King to witness what had been hidden in plain sight. Alaric inhaled slowly, his jaw tightening as understanding settled in, not with anger, but with a heavy, dawning realization. He did not speak for a long moment, his hand hovering before he rested it gently on Rowan's shoulder, careful not to cause discomfort. Rowan flinched at first, then steadied when Eliza squeezed his hand, and Alaric saw it, the way his son trusted her to make the moment bearable. The Alpha King closed his eyes briefly, as if committing the sight to memory, and when he opened them, there was regret there, raw and unguarded. He murmured Rowan's name, not as a command, but as a question, and Rowan answered by leaning closer, his small body pressing into Eliza's side. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the quiet sounds of the keep beyond the hall. Alaric rose slowly, his posture changed, less imposing and more burdened, and he turned his attention fully to Eliza. He thanked her, the words spoken plainly, without embellishment, acknowledging that her willingness to see what others had not had altered everything. Eliza accepted the gratitude with a nod, her focus never leaving Rowan, who remained calm in her presence. In that moment, the Alpha King understood that strength was not always loud or visible, and that his own authority had blinded him to quieter truths. He gave a quiet order for privacy and care, not as a decree, but as a promise, and Eliza felt the tension ease slightly from Rowan's frame. As they stood there together, bound by shared understanding, the future of Blackwood Keep shifted, guided not by power alone, but by the courage to finally look. The days that followed unfolded with a quiet intensity that reshaped Blackwood Keep without spectacle or announcement, as if the walls themselves were learning to listen. Alaric Blackwood moved with a new deliberateness, his attention lingering where it once passed by, his questions precise and measured. He summoned those responsible for Rowan's care, not with raised voice or threat, but with an expectation of truth that left no room for evasion. Eliza was present only briefly, standing at a respectful distance while the Alpha King asked about routines, schedules, and assumptions that had been accepted without scrutiny. Answers came haltingly, revealing patterns of oversight rather than malice, habits formed around convenience, and the mistaken belief that silence meant strength. Alaric absorbed it all, his expression controlled, though the tension in his shoulders spoke of a reckoning that cut inward. When he dismissed the room, he did so with clarity, outlining changes that would be immediate and lasting. Care protocols adjusted, observation prioritized, and voices encouraged rather than ignored. Rowan watched from Eliza's side, his posture uncertain but attentive, as if witnessing the world shift to accommodate him for the first time. Later, Alaric asked Eliza to walk with him through the inner courtyard, the air cool and still, the sound of water tracing a steady rhythm that grounded the moment. He spoke plainly, acknowledging his failure to see what had been quietly present, and the cost of assuming resilience where there had been need. Eliza listened without judgment, understanding that recognition did not erase what had happened, but it did open the door to something better. She spoke in return, not to accuse, but to explain the importance of patience and presence, how trust grew when someone stayed instead of turning away. Alaric nodded, absorbing her words with the seriousness of a leader who had learned that authority required humility. When they returned, Rowan approached his father cautiously, drawn by the change he sensed, and Alaric lowered himself again, offering a hand not as command, but invitation. Rowan hesitated, then placed his small hand there, the contact tentative but real, and Eliza felt a warmth spread through her chest at the sight. Over the next days, Rowan's routines softened, his sleep grew more restful, and his steps less guarded, changes subtle but unmistakable to those who paid attention. Eliza remained a constant presence, not elevated in title yet, but in trust, her role expanding naturally as Rowan sought her out. Whispers followed her through the keep, curiosity replacing dismissal, and though some eyes still measured her status, others reflected gratitude. Alaric observed this quietly, recognizing the shift in how the household responded to gentleness modeled rather than demanded. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the stone, Rowan stood between his father and Eliza, holding each of their hands, a simple bridge forged by shared resolve. Alaric spoke then, not loudly, but clearly, affirming that care would no longer be an afterthought within his walls, that strength would be defined by attentiveness as much as power. Eliza felt the weight of that declaration settle into the keep, a promise carried forward by action rather than words alone. As the light faded, Rowan leaned into Eliza's side, his trust no longer fragile, and in that quiet moment, the truth became undeniable that healing did not begin with force or command, but with the courage to see, to listen, and to stay. Eliza noticed the change before anyone else named it, not because it was dramatic, but because it showed itself in the smallest details, the way Rowan began to enter rooms without pausing at the threshold, the way his eyes lifted instead of searching the floor, the way his steps followed curiosity rather than caution. The keep responded slowly, adjusting to a new rhythm that centered care instead of assumption, and Eliza found herself at the heart of it without ceremony. She was no longer redirected when she remained with Rowan longer than scheduled, no longer questioned when she adjusted routines to suit his comfort, and no longer treated as invisible. Alaric Blackwood observed this with careful attention, noting how Rowan gravitated toward Eliza with quiet certainty, how he slept more deeply when she was nearby, how his laughter, rare and soft, surfaced most often in her presence. One afternoon, Alaric asked Eliza to join him and Rowan in the solar, a bright room warmed by late sunlight, its windows overlooking the inner gardens. He waited until Rowan was settled with a book before speaking, his voice calm and deliberate, acknowledging that trust had chosen Eliza long before he had. He spoke of responsibility, not as rank, but as recognition, and asked if she would accept a formal role in Rowan's daily care, one that would grant her authority to advocate without fear. Eliza listened, heart racing, understanding the weight of the offer, not for status, but for protection of what mattered most. She agreed without hesitation, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering, and Rowan looked up then, eyes bright with relief, as if the decision had always been his. From that moment, Eliza's presence was no longer questioned, but expected, her guidance sought rather than tolerated. She moved through the keep with a new confidence that did not erase her gentleness, shaping spaces to be more welcoming, encouraging others to notice what they once overlooked. Alaric supported these changes quietly, reinforcing them through action rather than decree, and the household followed, learning that attentiveness was a form of strength. Rowan thrived within this shift, his days filled with small victories, longer walks, deeper rest, and moments of joy that arrived without effort. One evening, as they sat together near the hearth, Rowan leaned against Eliza's side, his weight relaxed and trusting, and Alaric watched from across the room, the sight settling something long unsettled within him. He approached and knelt once more, placing a hand over Rowan's and then over Eliza's, his gesture unguarded and sincere. He thanked her again, not only for seeing what others had missed, but for staying when it would have been easier to step back, and Eliza felt the acknowledgement resonate through her, grounding her in purpose rather than pride. As the fire crackled softly and the keep settled into night, Rowan rested between them, safe and at ease, a living testament to what had changed. Eliza understood then that recognition was not a reward, but a responsibility carried forward, and as she held Rowan close, she accepted it fully, knowing that what they had built together would continue to shape the future, quietly and enduringly. Time moved differently after that, not faster or slower, but fuller, as if each day at Blackwood Keep now carried intention instead of habit. Eliza walked the corridors with Rowan beside her, his hand often brushing hers by choice rather than necessity, his steps light in a way that spoke of ease rather than caution. The household adjusted around them, voices softening when he passed, routines bending with quiet respect, and Eliza sensed that what had changed would not easily revert, because it had taken root in understanding rather than rule. Alaric Blackwood watched these moments with measured thought, recognizing that leadership was revealed not in declarations, but in the space one created for others to thrive. One morning, beneath a sky washed pale with early light, he gathered the household in the inner hall, not for ceremony, but for clarity. He spoke simply, affirming the standards now expected within his walls, that care was not optional, that attention was not weakness, and that those who noticed what others overlooked would be supported, not silenced. His gaze rested briefly on Eliza, not elevating her above others, but acknowledging her role in guiding them forward. Rowan stood close to her, his presence steady, no longer shrinking beneath the weight of observation. As days passed, laughter found its way into corners that had once been silent, and Eliza felt the quiet satisfaction of seeing Rowan choose joy without fear. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the old oak in the courtyard, Rowan leaned back against Eliza, watching clouds drift overhead, and asked if things would stay this way. Eliza answered honestly, telling him that change required care every day, but that he would not face it alone again. When Alaric joined them, he did not interrupt, only sat nearby, sharing the stillness, and in that shared quiet, a future took shape that was grounded and real. As evening settled, casting long shadows across the stone, Rowan reached for his father's hand, and then for Eliza's, linking them together with a trust that felt unbreakable. Alaric held both, his grip firm and warm, understanding that protection was not possession, but presence. Eliza felt a sense of belonging settle over her, not defined by title or rank, but by purpose, and she accepted it with calm resolve. As the lights of the keep glowed softly against the darkening sky, Eliza looked around and saw a place transformed not by force, but by the courage to see and the willingness to stay. Rowan rested easily between them, his breathing slow and peaceful, and in that moment, Eliza knew that the story they had written together would continue beyond these walls, carried forward by choices made every day to honor gentleness as strength. The night closed in quietly, holding their shared promise, and Blackwood Keep stood as it always had, strong and enduring, now tempered by compassion that would guide it long into the future.